Impact segment tonight. As we have been reporting, there are a number of white Americans who are enabling the chaos apparent in places like Chicago's South Side. These pundits and politicians make excuses for bad behavior and refuse to honestly confront the issues that drive violent crime. Case in point, drug dealers have devastated many inner city neighborhoods, yet the liberals scream that the justice system is unfair to black drug dealers and users. Well, joining us now from Irvine, California, Heather McDonald from the Manhattan Institute, who has studied the situation, and here in the studio, Jason Riley, member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. So the beef seems to be, Mr. Riley, that blacks are being prosecuted and incarcerated more than whites for the same drug crimes. And you say?
I say the evidence does not support that claim at all. Blacks are caught up in the criminal justice system for drugs and other crimes because of black behavior. And a lot of these studies leave out the most relevant factors, and that's how they reach the conclusions they reach. For instance, they say that blacks committing the same crimes are locked up at higher rates. Bill, if you and I commit the same crime, but I've committed it 10 times before, I'm going to get a harsher sentence than
Okay,
you.
so a lot of it is what has happened in the past,
Sure.
and a lot of it is circumstance. Is there any, though, in your opinion, truth to, well, the black criminal defendants can't afford the better attorneys, so they get hosed?
No, I don't buy that at all. And it's feeding another myth, which is that incarceration rates among blacks are driven by drug crimes, but they're not. Blacks are about 13% of the population, but they're about 38% of people incarcerated. If you threw out all the people incarcerated because of drugs, the black incarceration rate would still be right around 37%, 38%.
Is that right?
That's right, because
So
blacks are also overrepresented in violent crimes, in burglaries, property crimes, assault and battery, and so forth. It is not drugs that is, or the drug laws that is driving the black incarceration rate.
Mr. McDonald, if you listen to the ACLU and MSNBC, the white power structure is going around arresting young black men for smoking marijuana and putting them in the penitentiary for many years. That's what they're peddling. And you say?
That's simply false. Nobody is going to penitentiary for smoking marijuana. You have to have many convictions on your record, and if it's a possession arrest, it's possession for sale. And you know what? If you go to Central Harlem police community meetings, what they say is we want the dealers off the street. You arrest them and they're back there next day. People understand that the outdoor drug trade is destroying their neighborhoods. As Jason points out, and I did this study, the drug offenses is not what's driving the black incarceration rate. You can take out all the drug offenses and you still have the same percentage of blacks in prison.
Right. But there
this
is
is
no
something
doubt
that is driven by violent crime. And I love Mr. Rangel's complaint that the government is ignoring inner city problems. They're going nuts about New York City policing because it has managed to bring homicide down in black neighborhoods by 80% by stop and frisk. And this is the government finally responding to black crime and saving lives.
The grievance industry, they don't want aggressive policing, but they do want safe streets, so you can't have. But look, here's the crux of the matter. There isn't anybody honestly reporting this story, and that's what drives me crazy. The South Side of Chicago's violence, Mr. Riley, is driven by drug gangs. They may not be selling drugs, but they're killing other people who are, or whatever. That's what's driving all of this stuff. All right, but instead, the Charles Rangels, the Jesse Jacksons, the Al Sharptons, they'll never tell you that. Therefore, they aren't protecting their own people.
That's right.
Because it's blacks who are getting affected by it.
The civil rights industry, and this is what it is become,
absolutely,
has no vested interest in highlighting that aspect of what's going on. The whole point of the civil rights industry is to blame the problems of blacks on racism, and particularly white racism. Black on black crime doesn't fit that narrative. But Trayvon Martin, non-black on black gun violence, does fit that narrative, so they decided to make him a cause célèbre.
What do you think of them investing all of this energy into the Martin case, all right, the marches, the protests, everything, and absolutely nothing into the disintegration of the African-American family and the violence in places like Chicago? It just doesn't make any
highlights
sense.
the disconnect between the needs of the black community and the leadership that they have. It's a disconnect that has been growing for decades, and we have another example
the
of it.
groundswell of protests from the black community. They're not out there protesting. Why do you think that is, Heather?
I think that the desire of victimology is very strong. There are protests sometimes for awful killings. And by the way, this week we had an 8-year-old girl in Oakland who was shot dead in her sleep by gangbangers shooting at her apartment building that also shot her grandmother and 2 other children. So again, the media has no interest in this.
Why does
I
the
don't
media,
know.
in your
There's a
opinion, have you been
passivity.
doing this for a while, why does the media have no interest in it? Why?
Because they are dedicated to the myth that the thing holding blacks back is white racism, whereas in fact, as hard as it is for many people to believe, this country has made remarkable progress, and we do have an awful history, but at this point, the changes that need to come are the decisions to get married, not have children out of
Yeah, they
wedlock,
have to come within
not
the
drop out of,
All right.
it has to come from within, and there's not much that government can do for that.
Do you agree, Mr. Riley, that the media is invested, the national media is invested in the old racism, whites persecuting blacks?
Of course, of course. That is what the media does. They run to the Al Sharptons and the Jesse Jacksons. Sometimes they even give them their own shows to talk about these things, and that's what they do. There are blacks who want to talk about these issues of personal responsibility. Bill Cosby wants to do it. Ben Carson wants to do it. They're just not represented in the traditional civil rights leadership that we have today.
I thank you both. And directly ahead, Anthony Weiner, big trouble.